um, the honorable chairs and members of this committee. I'm delighted to be here this morning and humbled also to be making this presentation before my seniors. Allow me to begin by making a disclaimer. One is that, as you all know, that this housing levy is one of the things that was highly litigated. It is still before the courts. So today I'll try and avoid going to the merits and demerits of the housing levy per se, because that judgment will be made on the 24th of November, after which we should be free to talk about it in greater detail. But I'll try and cover as much as I can. Number two, Chair, is that at the end of my submission, hoping that the work of this committee will effect some changes in the Constitution at some point, hopefully, I would like to submit two requests. One is that under Schedule 4 of our Constitution, where the Senate religiously allocates resources to the counties, there is a small omission in that our Constitution has envisioned urban areas to be devolved, but it is missing in Schedule 4. And what that means is that our urban areas are not getting any resources unless it is the money from the World Bank that comes in as conditional grants. And that is a big problem because our cities and towns are dying and decaying because of lack of investment. And number two, I'd like to make a submission before this committee that we need to relook at how we address the issue of marginalization. I think the way we have defined marginalization, it is a little bit unfair to the class of people we call the urban poor. And I'd like to submit before this committee that the urban poor is probably the most marginalized person in Kenya. And we need to relook at how we define marginalization, because if we only define marginalization based on areas, and yet there is somebody who is probably a meal away from starvation, a person who has no basic sanitation, they actually pay to use ablution facilities. For someone who faces what we call the penalty of poverty, which is they pay 172% more for water than you and I. They pay up to 147% more for electricity. I think it is the high tide away. They're a huge population. Chair, before I then get into the presentation, allow me to set a little bit of context. We all know the issue of the housing levy. At some point, I had to run to my good senior, Professor Ndongo, because I was confused whether we were actually debating a housing bill or the finance bill. And so all that sweating, Chair, that you are seeing coming out is because I was...
You've become national, very famous with that sweating. And I'm happy you're talking about it because we're wondering what has become of Hinga.
Let me say, the Honorable Vice President, that when I went to Professor Ndongo for some counseling, I was expecting some lessons in economics, but he referred me to the Bible. And he read for me Genesis chapter 3, verse 19. And he told me, Hinga, out of the sweat of your brow, you shall eat. So sweating is biblical.
But the Bible seems to have helped in not sweating today.
Maybe a bit too early to call it. Chair, there is a very interesting report that was done by the World Bank in the year 2017. Now, like anybody who would like to make comments on the issue, matters to do with housing, just get a copy of that. It's available online. It is called Unavailable and Unaffordable. And I believe this study painted a very good picture about the housing situation in Kenya. There are things that are indisputable, And I think where things become a bit murky is the how to solve. But there are certain things that are not in dispute. Number one, we are one of the fastest urbanizing countries in the world. We have over 500,000 people who are coming to urban areas every year. That is a fact. Number two, Chair, is that if you look at the percentage of what you call the urban population, at the moment, and these are very old statistics, which is 2019, after the census, we had about 6.5 million Kenyans living in slums. That is also a fact. So if you're adding 500,000 people every year into urban areas, when they come to those urban areas, what do they find? Chair, they find something which is interesting, and I know a professor here will back me up because of it's a lot more in economics. Chair, what you find is that we have very low incomes in Kenya. And where you have low incomes, and then you have got very expensive land, ordinarily then what happens is that rentals tend to be very high. Okay, low incomes, expensive land, rents tend to be very high. And so, therefore, your working class, I'm not talking about people who are not working. I'm talking about your working class, people who wake up, some even earlier than we do, to go to work, cannot be able to afford the kind of rentals that we find in the urban areas. And then what happens is that they get pushed out in a process which is called gentrification. You start pushing them out, okay? But where do they go? Some may say, why can't they go to Mlolongo? Why can't they go to Kitengela where there is a lot of land? The challenge, Chair, is that they need to be close to where they work. Because again, if they move further away from where they work, the cost of transport becomes a hindrance. So where do they go? They go and set up informal settlements. And that is why, Chair, as of 2019, we had 1,141 informal settlements in this country. They do nothing. If we do nothing about it, Chair, in a few years' time, our major cities will be nothing but major slums. So that's also an important context to be able to put. Now, there is a study that has been done by the Center for Affordable Housing in Africa. In 2016, Nairobi had been ranked as having the third most expensive land of the cities that were polled in Africa. Today, Nairobi has the most expensive land in the continent. So how do you have most expensive land? You have got very low incomes. And so this is an issue that I believe should be able to bring all of us together because it is ours to solve, irrespective of which political divide you come from. Even us who live in most affluent areas, you can attest that there is a slum next to where you live. And at some point, if we do nothing, a high wall is not going to keep you safe. There will be a slum right outside your gate. And so I believe that this issue of housing should actually not divide, but actually should bring people together. I was privileged to be in the last government, honorable chairs, and housing was part of the Jubilee agenda. Also, housing was a core pillar in the Azimio manifesto. As a matter of fact, where we ended, the Kenya Kwanza proposed 3% on the levy. We actually ended at where Azimio had proposed, which was 1.5%. So I would like to believe that if we are all genuine and we put away our political caps, we can be able to look at this matter of housing, soberly, and we can be able to agree. We may disagree, we may not agree on everything, but we agree we have a challenge. So, Chair, I'm going to go very quickly to the economics of housing because I think that is very, very, very important, the real merits of the levy itself. So I have a presentation, Chair, which is has 4 headings, which is a quick introduction, the economic context, the economic recovery, and then I'll go a little bit into the housing fund and offerings. Chair, the Kenya Kwanza government has a plan, and our plan is to have 1 million Kenyans owning their homes in this first dispensation. Now, Chair, the reason that number is not a thumbsuck, it is because in Kenya, we have a housing demand of 250 homes a year. The market is only able to produce 50,000. And of the 50,000, only 1,000 is affordable housing. So we have got 49,000 for the high end, that is a 3%. And then 97% of Kenyans are left with the 1,000 that is being produced by the market today. So our plan is ambitious and bold because we believe that we have a systemic failure in housing in Kenya. And for us to be able to understand how this systemic failure has to step back into history and realize that at the turn of independence, when we came up with the housing policy, we were, as a government, building homes through National Housing Corporation, site and service, and that happened until the late 80s, when the infamous, when we got into trouble with the IMFs and the World Bank at the time, and we got into structural adjustments. And at that time, one of the things that we were told to exit from was housing. And from that point to date, the likes of National Housing Corporation has never received any funding from government. Most of you perhaps have lived in estates that were funded through National Housing Corporation or the old municipal councils. So, Chair, let me go quickly to the economics of housing, which I think is very important to understand. One, Chair, is that we know right now we are in a bit of an economic meltdown of some sort. And this did not just start now. It has been there from COVID. We never recovered from COVID. We are in Russia. We never recovered. And we are having challenges because and when economies are contracting, Chair, the objective, the primary target is to make sure that you do not get into a recession. Getting into a recession, Chair, to get out of a recession is more expensive than preventing yourself getting into a recession. Now, Chair, as I said, the do nothing is not an option. And this is a case where you get presented with bad options. When you're going through an economic meltdown, when you look at the options that you have, very few of them are good options. Then when you take the context that our economies lack resilience, we don't have enough social safety nets so that when you have an economic meltdown, you can be able to send checks to the poor people and even to the working class who sometimes get laid off. Chair, we have a situation of dilapidated supply chains. So I don't know whether I'm going backwards or forward. Okay. Then, Chair, I read something yesterday in the Nation newspaper, and I was a bit surprised by what I read there, because I guess trying to paint that this government has borrowed so much money, they failed to understand that part of the reason why our debt has increased, even without borrowing, is that because some of our borrowing is in hard currency, and our shilling has depreciated. Even without borrowing, the debt has gone up. So our currency is devaluing, we have high inflation, we have rising interest rates, we have uncertainty that is there in the market. Chair, we have seen in our own context here, we have got a huge unemployment issue. We have a huge youth bulge. We have our economy is around contracting, manufacturing. We have had prolonged drought. We have had serious impact from COVID. And I've said, even other places like in the US, where they are increasing interest rates to manage their own inflation, it is actually causing capital flight. If you look today at the stock exchange, the shares are misbehaving, and some of those companies have very good fundamentals, but they are depreciating. So therefore, Chair, I really want to make this point very clear, that You know, sometimes to the public, it looks like the policymakers, maybe we just sit down and we don't really apply our minds on some of these things. It is, I sat there when COVID came knocking on our doors. And when you looked at the options that we had, there was an inverse relationship between trying to contain the disease and the economy. And Chair, there were many examples. For example, South Africa went on to what is called hard shutdown. The effect of hard shutdown, you saw, was something which was called an insurrection. People got tired of being kept at home, and they went and broke into supermarkets and took all the booze. In Brazil, on the other hand, they assumed that this is like flu. Okay, so what did they do? They were relaxed, go to the beach, enjoy yourself, in Homa, to Meishi na Homa all this time. What happened? There were caskets that were being deposited at their state house because people died. So you're faced with very challenging and balancing situation. So, Chair, during that time, you are either going to go to austerity or you have got to increase government expenditure. Now, when you look at the Great Recession, which was in 2008, if you look at what the US and Europe did, they did the opposite of each other. The US went on a major capital investment in infrastructure. Europe, on the other hand, went on a serious austerity measure. What happened is that the US got out of the recession much faster. Europe, you saw the likes of Greece and all those other places, they went, they had a lot of challenges. Another example, Chair, is in the 1930s when we had the Great Depression. And when FDR, then the president of the US, the strategies that he put, one of them was what is called the extended public works, which gave birth to something which is called the American Dream, which was many houses as you can, because as we get to the economics of housing, you'll understand why there was a focus on housing because of its long supply chain. So, Chair, So there are several strategies that can stem a recession under this condition. One of them is creating consumptive demand, encouraging spending, creating jobs in industries with multiplier effect. Now, Chair, and this is almost like a paradox, because you need to be spending where money is shrinking, because revenues are contracting. But you're saying you need to spend to be able to give people more money to spend so that you don't get into a recession. So, Chair, if you look at certain economies like the US, during this economic meltdown, what did they do? During COVID, what did they do? They printed money. They gave people checks. They did something which is called qualitative easing, which is they bought back their bonds. Why? Because they wanted to make sure that there is money circulating in the economy. Because when there is an economic meltdown, what you don't want to do is lack of that spending. And so, Chair, as I get now to the context of why we have put so much emphasis on housing, it is because in Kenya, we may not have the powers to print those checks. We may not be able to have the kind of monies to buy back our bonds. But there is something that we can be able to do. And what is that? We can be able to put checks in people's hands by having a deliberate plan that is focused on creating the consumptive demand while solving a decade or a century-old problem of housing. And that, Chair, brings me to the issue of the housing levy. So, Chair, as I've said, our investment in housing projects helps us to issue what is called the stimulus check, which will make the required investment in housing, which in turn will expand enterprise, and it will create jobs, and that will be to the benefit of the citizens. Now, it's important to understand why you want money to be spent, and especially when you're talking at the lowest level, which is the local economic area. It is because, especially when you're spending money at the bottom of the pyramid, that money tends to circulate around there. You see, today, if I gave my good friend Omar Hassan 10,000 shillings, he'll probably spend it. Okay, I know he didn't partake some of those other drinks, so maybe not a good example. But maybe those are two drinks. Maybe he'll go spend that money outside the country. if you put 100 shillings.
It's okay, you can use Opio and I.
That's why, Chair, they were not served tea. And we were served that drink is later.
So, Honorable Wandai, I can see you after this, and I'm sure. Anyway, on a serious note, so Chair, the impact of spending money at the bottom of the pyramid is that money actually never leaves. It keeps on circulating around that area. You don't need to be an economist to believe that. But Chair, there is something that is important to understand, is that it's not like Kenyans live in open spaces. Kenyans have houses, but those houses do not meet the basic definition, what is in our constitution and even in the UN, of what is decent housing. And that is why I believe the issue of housing was in all the major parties' manifestos, okay? Because we have a problem. But Chair, to solve this, you need scale. Because it is the large economy, it's leveraging the large economies of scale that you can be able to produce the jobs that we want. Chair, we talk about manufacturing, and sometimes we talk about manufacturing in abstract terms. Question is, what are you manufacturing? What are you manufacturing? Because you must have a plan. What are you going to manufacture? That is why our plan, when you look at the long supply chain of housing, from this country we import hinges, Chair. Hinges we import. Now, I don't know, we can just look at this door here. And if you count, there are about 4 hinges on each door. On average, a house has 5 doors. So that means those are 20 hinges you can make from just one house. If you do 200,000 homes, you do the math. How many hinges are we talking about? And as much as hinges looks like something we should not be talking about in a national dialogue, hinges could end up being a big industry because you have created the consumptive demand. That is the plan, is create the demand, then create industries, because you must manufacture for something. And so those who don't understand why we have really put so much emphasis on housing is because of the long supply chain. So if you talk about hinges, think of it. How many nails do you need in 200,000 homes? It's about 5 million kgs of nails. That's another industry. We have doors, we have windows. As a matter of fact, as a ministry, we have itemized 69 items. 69, 1, 2, 3, 68, 69 items that will be produced locally because the materials are available locally, that we are going to do at scale and create the jobs. So, Chair, this housing levy provides us with the capital to be able to scale. Because for housing, the kind of capital that you're looking for is what is called long-term capital. And we don't have investors who are going to come in with long-term capital. They start looking at risk. And what is the first thing that they look at? They look at a hustler and they say, the only thing I can see is this guy will never be able to pay. So I can never build a house for this guy. So that's why, what do? The investors, they focus on you and I. Because we have a check, we have a salary, and by the way, it is not everybody who has a salary that can afford. Let me give you some shocking statistics, Chair, and these could be dated, so we will look at the latest information. But as of 2019, Chair, 50% of all payslip carrying Kenyans earned 50,000 shillings and below. Actually, 75%, sorry. 75% of all payslip carrying Kenyans earned less than 50,000 shillings. So maybe since then there's been several increases, but that number is still what it is. 150,000, the Kenyans who earn 150,000 and above are 3%. So if you don't have a plan, because of the low wages and because of the high rentals and the high income, you're going to continue having slums coming up every day. So, Chair, that is really the economics of housing. So what does that all end up in? 3 things that housing will be able to do. One is that injection, that money that you're getting has a huge multiplier effect. Economists tell us that we can add between $1.5 and $3 for every 1 shilling we invest in housing. That is why we love housing. If you take maybe roads or any other infrastructure, that multiplier effect is not as high. The other part is jobs that will be created. And I heard a lot of people talking about Hinga nataka tu kujenga kazi yake ni ya Mujengo. You know, okay, Mujengo is still kazi. But the reality is, this plan gets our manufacturing alive. And that is where the jobs are created. As a matter of fact, let me take you quickly to this slide, I'll come back. Because this really demonstrates what I'm talking about. I've just taken one product, which is cement. And let's look at the value chain of cement. Chair, I know maybe the whatevers are not very clear, but I start with the yellow tracks there. And they're not yellow because of Kenya Kwanza colors. But Chair,
It is okay.
that is... Now, Chair, the cement manufacturing starts in quarry. It does not start in the cement factory. It starts in the quarries. So if we are going to do 200,000 units a year, we need 18 million bags of cement. 18 million bags of cement. We produce cement in Kenya. So we will have a lot of jobs at the guys who are in quarries. But then there is a guy who is excavating, there is a guy who is loading, there is a guy who is driving the truck. Those trucks, Chair, it's a huge economy, logistics. Those are new jobs you're going to create. Then the truck goes to the factory with the raw material. When you get to the factory, Chair, what do you find there? Okay? You have people who are going to offload. They're very different from those who are going to be putting it in the whole manufacturing process. And quickly, Chair, then there is another truck there, the red one now you can see. Why it is different is because this truck is not the same as the truck that took the limestone from the quarry. These are different. These are new job that you have created. Then it comes to the construction site. At the construction site, you still need people to offload. You have your batching plant. You've got people who mix the mortar. And some of them, you can see, we use wheelbarrows, and they will carry the mortar. And the guy who's carrying the mortar is very different from the guy who is actually doing the construction or fabricating the panels. Chair, this is just one product, which is cement. So I can tell you, Chair, that the economics of housing makes a lot of sense. And that is just one product. And you can take any other product, Chair. And we didn't even talk about packaging. There is a whole new packaging because those cement needs to be in different packages as they get taken to the site. Chair, you know, we talk about Juakali industries and we talk about informal traders. And sometimes we talk about them in abstract form. I have had a chance to interact with them, Chair. And let me tell you, these are some of the hardworking guys, but they do not get a fair share of the shake. And I'll tell you why. We experimented with a group, or 3 groups, of Ngong Road, Kamukunji, and Kariobangi, when we did Park Road housing. We gave them 7,000 doors to do. Chair, we gave them to do doors because we know they already know how to make doors. These guys, that 7,000 doors came, including installation, came to about 123 million. That's probably the biggest check they had ever seen. But Chair, what is the problem? Is that they know how to make doors, but between them and the user of the door, there are about 5 people who each make more money than them. They are the guys who are having to fabricate the doors, but several people in between are making more money, brokers, than these Juakali people. So how do we then get the Juakali people to formalize? This is what we did. We gave them a contract to do 7,000 doors. It was 123 million. They did the doors, Chair, and I can confirm they did good doors. And they were paid. And Chair, 58 of them ended up being homeowners in the same houses where they were building those doors. And the final thing is, when they got paid, because they were informal, they didn't know about a guy called KRA. And soon, KRA came knocking on their doors to say, you owe me money. And so they came running to me and they said, PS, KRA is going to shut down our accounts because we owe them money. So I had to call the CG then. I told him, these are honorable people. They will pay you because they're still owed a bit of money, but midwife them because now they become new taxpayers. We are talking about 17, 18 million Kenyans who are today maybe not in the tax bracket. If we do housing at scale, we start to bring them into the tax bracket. We can't keep on talking about 3 million Kenyans and we have no plan. This is the plan to formalize them. Give them a product, give them the support, and they will be able to produce. So, Chair, this is the summary. Do housing projects at scale. You're going to create jobs, and you're going to have a very long cash circulation process. Because of time, Chair, if you look at the economics of 200,000 homes, that is per year, if you look at the numbers that I gave, if 200,000 homes at an average of about 2.3 million shillings a house, average, that gives you 460 billion. That is a cost. Out of the 460 billion, Chair, if there is a multiplier effect of 3 times, okay, it means that you have injected in the economy 1.15 trillion shillings. So the levy that we are collecting today, once we scale it up, we should be able to get a lot more money in the economy. Then, Chair, if you take the 10.5% of the mjengo is labor, then it means that we will have about 48.3 billion of money going to wages. So we have got more people coming into the wage bracket. They become more taxpayers. Professor Ndongo is very happy because he's collecting more money, and we are building the nation. And then, Chair, if you look at the average number of formal and informal jobs, you can do up to 2.1 million jobs when you at peak time. So those are the numbers, and I've given the assumptions there. Now, a quick summary of why then this housing levy. We look at it from 2 sides in financing, supply side and demand side. Chair, on the supply side, that is where the developers are. Today, developers are only developing for those who can pay, as I've said. Number 2, they cherry pick. They cherry pick. Why? Because they say money is not emotional. You know, they want to go to where the money is going to give them the highest return. Now, let me demonstrate to you. This year alone, I have advertised so many projects. I'm sure you've been seeing them in the newspapers. The first round I advertised was around Nairobi Metropolitan. I had an influx of investors who wanted to take up those homes. Second round, I went to Western Kenya, Kisii, Migori, all those places. I had one investor out of 55 parcels of land that I whatever. Now, Honorable Wandai and the people from that block, you are also Kenyans. You also deserve affordable homes. So if today we say, let's go and leave it to the private sector, what is the private sector going to do? They're only going to focus on where they're going to get a return. So that is why this housing levy gives us the ability to be able to build these homes indiscriminately in every part of our country. And that's why I wrote to every member of parliament and I requested that you give us land in your constituency. Think about it. 200 units, Honorable Wandai, 200 units is average of about 500 million shillings. That is about 5 times your CDF. That means there's going to be so many jobs back at home. There will be lots of industries. Your local hardwares are going to thrive. So, Chair, that's the reason why we need to do something on the supply side, because investors will only focus on those who can afford. On the demand side, though, on the other hand, we talked about low incomes. So the buyers, they lack adequate funding. They do not qualify for mortgages. They'll walk to a bank and the bank will look at them and tell them, listen, you don't qualify, period. The existing mortgages are too costly. Chair, in this high rising interest regime, I'm sure most of you have got a mortgage. Some of your mortgages have reached 18, 20% now as we speak. This government is committing through this housing levy to give every Kenyan who wants, because it is not designed for certain people, it's for every Kenyan. If you're in social housing, we'll give you a house at 3%, fixed. Fixed until you finish paying, or Jesus comes, whichever comes first. Number 2, if you're in affordable housing, we'll give you fixed at 6% for up to 30 years for you to pay. If you are in market, because majority of the working class are in that market bracket, you're not also forgotten. We're giving you 9% fixed. That is half of what you're paying today in the market. And that has been made possible because of this levy. Because the levy is giving us scale, is giving us cheap funding that we are able to advance to Kenyans. So, Chair, this figure here, I'm just going to say it is the pooling of money from yourself, myself. We bring it together in the fund, and then we are able to give the developer an offtake, so that now the developer does not have to say, this Juakali artisan or that Mamamboga cannot afford. What they see, they don't see Mamamboga, they see the fund. Because the fund will give them a guaranteed offtake. That if you build these houses, according to the contract, we will offtake those units. That's what that slide says in many numbers. And this is the summary of what I've said. We have got various models for social housing, that is for people who earn 20,000 and below. Today, if you earn 20,000 and below, you'll get a house which you'll only pay 3,200 on a diminishing number. That is on a depreciating or amortized number. So you start 3,200, and as you go into the future, that figure is going to be coming down. That is for 1 room, 2 room is 4,800, 6,400. By the way, Chair, these numbers here are not a thumbsuck. These figures, this is the average rental that is being paid by these people who. So that is what that slide means. The next slide is now the. This is now for those who are in affordable housing bracket, and that is those who earn 20,000 and 150,000. That is how we defined you. You will get a studio unit if you want to start a park in life for 5,200 shillings only. You get a 2-bedroom house for 10,400, and you get a 3-bedroom house for 15,600 shillings. Chair, those figures are made possible because of this housing levy. And lastly, those who are in the market, there is something for you as well. You will get a much bigger unit with better finishes, and you will be able to get, let me get these figures here. 31,300 for a 2-bedroom house, which is quite big, which is 60 square meters, and you'll be able to pay 41,800 for an 80 square meter unit. Chair, there is one more category, which is our folks in the rural areas. If you're in the rural areas, I've got good news for you, is that we will come, we are working with our TVET colleges, with our ABMT centers. Honorable Kalonzo, I have got an ABMT center in Mwingi, where we are putting what we call hydroform machines. And these hydroform machines, or they use what is called stabilized soil blocks. Okay, so we can be able to get as many young people to come. And for every block they make, we will pay them 3 shillings. And we will use those blocks to convert the mud houses into decent homes. And if you do that, we'll also be able to give you a facility which you will be paying for a period of time, and it is going to be at 6% if you want to build your rural home. And if you're in the social housing category, you still get it at 3%. So there is something for everybody in this affordable housing agenda. Chair, I really thank you for giving me enough time to prosecute this issue, and I will be ready for any questions. Thank you.
We thank you so much, Wanahinga. By the way, in Mwingi, we had when Mwingi women are themselves building their own houses. No hydroform, good plants. You have plants. Who is the next one?
Below, then
Rogo. Then Rogo.
They have come from after the CS National Treasury.
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
Zim will be telling us what plans they have.
They want to come after Juguna or Juguna first?
After Njuguna, because they need to hear him.
I think so.
Yes.
Prof.
But,
I think everybody is really looking for you. They want to hear. Give a bit of comfort like you did to Hinga.
I thought you should be the last. Chair.
I think Kenyans need a bit of comfort.
Yes,
Chair.
Yes.
I thought you could be the last after the rest are finished, then he wraps up.
Well, what do you feel? Either way.
I'm okay, Chairman, with wrapping up because.
Wrapping up.
Yes.
Okay. So we
It
go
will all-
to Bilo.
It will all come to you. So, Rugo and Bilo.
Thank you, Mr.